Today I want to talk about Stacey Wilkins, and Bill Bedenbaugh's offensive line took another hit, and all that's coming up after the bumper.
Don't be cornering me. Hold up. Time. You gotta help me with that corner shit.
What's up, kinfolk? It's RJ Young. I am not on step mill. Consider hitting the like and subscribe button because I upload a video every single day. It's always college football related, sports related. We have a good time. Today, I want to talk about Stacey Wilkins, who is no longer listed on the online roster for the University of Oklahoma. He is a redshirt freshman and was on the two deep ahead of the Red River rivalry as left tackle. And really, I expected to see a lot of him in 2020, but he joins EJ Ndoma-Ogar and Jalen Redmond and Kennedy Brooks as fellas that are opting out or not just going to participate in this year's season. Now, I think that Wilkins' disappearance from the online roster is not the same as EJ's disappearance from the online roster, because Ndoma-Ogar had not been on campus for the season. He'd been at home for most of this, and it was a real opt-out, whereas I'm thinking that Stacey Wilkins has a little bit more to it. It might be an impending transfer. We'll have to wait and see, because he was a guy that Bedenbaugh was able to get from Arkansas, who wanted to go to Arkansas and was talked into going to the University of Oklahoma for all the reasons that you might expect. One is playing for championships. Another is look at the offensive linemen that get drafted out of Oklahoma. But knowing what Arkansas has been able to do here recently and how good they have looked in a very short amount of time with a head coach who is a former offensive line coach and another offensive line coach in Brad Davis, who is a great developer of offensive linemen and a former OU offensive lineman, I could see how Arkansas might be in the mix here. But you still got to finish out the semester. There's still a lot of moving pieces to it. But not being listed on the online roster is always a sign that you're no longer with the team and don't expect to rejoin the team. Now, I find this all to be rather interesting, knowing that Bill Bedenbaugh's offensive line is very much in flux. As a matter of fact, going into that Red River rivalry, we saw that Finley Felix was pushed into the two deep. Now, there's been a lot of moving and shaking on that offensive line, and that's also the reason why this is worrisome, because that's the strength of the team. Creed Humphrey in the middle, Tyrese Robinson and Marquise Hayes on either side, and then an Adrian Ely or Eric Swinson. Anton Harrison showing up as a true freshman to start at left tackle is a great sign for him. It's not necessarily a great sign for the offensive line, unless he is some sort of preternatural talent for which nobody had seen before. But the preternatural talent that is there, Andrew Rain, is basically rotating in as well. So perhaps Bedenbaugh is still trying to figure out what his offensive line is. And this is with Bray Walker still on the team and very much on that depth chart somewhere. Same thing with Darrell Simpson. Those are two guys that were Army All-Americans. And in Bray Walker, a five-star offensive tackle who was homegrown in Moore, went to Westmore, Oklahoma, or Westmore High School in Moore, Oklahoma. I'm not sure if this is really the harbinger of bad things to come that some people seem to think that it is, because I think that your five are still intact, or six, I should say, knowing that Swinson and Harrison have been kind of rotating in and out. But in regard to getting good reps and getting good depth and getting good practices in, this does hurt you, right? Because the thing that Bill Bedenbaugh was able to do when he first got to Oklahoma was change the way that the offensive line practiced, change the way that the offensive line worked out, change the way that they went through their strength and conditioning, where there were two offensive line coach, one for the interior, one for the tackles. Before Bedenbaugh got there, this is the Bruce Kittle era and Bobby Jack Wright era, he consolidated that into one house and said, I'm going to take a grad assistant and myself, and we're going to divvy you up into smaller groups so that you get more one-on-one work and you get more reps, and he would put them through their paces. As a matter of fact, say a couple years ago, I think, I did an interview with Bronson Irwin, who was a part of that offensive line group when Bill Bedenbaugh first got hired. And that was one of the things that he made clear is he changed the way that we went about being physical. He wanted us to be bigger. He wanted us to be able to impose our will in the late third and early fourth quarters to shut people out of games. And one of the ways in which he did that was taking a big group of offensive linemen and making them smaller groups and having them go one-on-one so they could work their techniques and make each other better. I think that in that way, that's how you're gonna miss a Stacey Wilkins. But when he got to Oklahoma, he already needed to put on a tremendous amount of weight, because as long as he did not have the girth that you wanted him to have at those tackles positions. And it's not as if this couldn't have happened, right? Like Tyrus Thompson came in looking a lot like Stacey Wilkins did as a true freshman and ended up being one of the better offensive linemen to come out of the last 10 years, along with guys like Darrell Williams. Both of those guys were not necessarily large men in the way that we think of offensive linemen. They were tall and skinny. Being able to put on that sort of weight in just a year's time, probably not what it was going to be. Always needed Stacey Wilkins to grow up just a little bit in as far as his size, but to say something about his maturity might also be on display here now, because one of the things that is really awful about being an offensive lineman in college is you realize how much bigger you have to get and how much more technically sound you have to get. And when they bring in a guy like Noah Nelson behind you, who's every bit of 6'8", 300+ pounds as a true freshman, you can be discouraged in how you might actually be looked at in regard to how you, exist on the depth chart. I can understand this from everybody's side. What we do know for sure, though, is that he's no longer on the roster, and that means he's not practicing with the team. And this is with Oklahoma having to play Texas Christian in Amon G. Carter this weekend at 11 a.m. I don't think the offensive line is going to get challenged that much, but I didn't think they were going to get challenged that much against Iowa State or Kansas State for that matter. So we'll have to wait and see how this plays out, because we're not even through the month of October yet. All right, that is it for me. Deuces.